Hi everybody, welcome to the official Painted Lady Coaching YouTube channel. I'm super excited for this week and for this upcoming month, really. I am going to be going on all about toxic and narcissistic abuse cycles. I know it's probably interesting to say that I'm excited about that, but I really am just excited to get this information out there and to kind of address this topic because I feel like it's such a personal topic to me in particular. And something I'm going to kind of be focusing on within my coaching practice that I am going to be starting. I've been a little bit behind the 8 ball with this past week just because of my injury that I had when I got into a car accident fairly recently. And I did end up having to go to the doctor and getting some injections and all of that fun stuff. But luckily, like, I'm okay. I'm just still having like a little bit of like residual pain in my shoulder. So all fun stuff. But anyway, today's topic, since I said that we're kind of going into like toxic abuse cycles and like narcissistic abuse cycles, I'm going to be starting off with basically what that sort of looks like, the narcissistic abuse cycle, and the different stages, what that can look like, and signs and symptoms, and some things to consider when healing from the narcissistic abuse cycle once you are out. But anyway, let's get right to it. So I know that a lot of people, like, they have like different, I guess, definitions of what the narcissistic abuse cycle looks like, or what that can look like, which it typically does consist of the idealization phase, devaluation phase, and discard and hoovering. And I'll break all of those down. However, I have a little bit of like a tweaked version of that myself that I feel like a lot of people tend to like leave out. But anyway, let's start with idealization, which this is the part of the relationship where everything is like on the up and up and everything is perfect, and everything is cloud 9. And when I was in the situation, I would say that's almost exactly how that felt for me. It felt like I was like on cloud 9 with this person, and I had really lucked out, I would say. But this phase really just kind of focuses on like kind of building a connection with the person of interest. And this typically includes doing so by love bombing, which is like, very like excessive, like gift giving, compliments, often being put on like a pedestal, or, just idealizing, a lot of idealizing, hinting maybe at like future promises, and maybe even some like seemingly innocent like jealousy whenever like attention is veered away from them. And a lot of like mirroring can even happen within this phase, which typically consists of just mirroring back your interests and behaviors, just for the sake of really collecting data and just kind of figuring out where your vulnerabilities are and your weak points. And it's often used against you later down the line in like the devaluation phase, which does segue right into that. So at some point after this like initial phase of idealization, then the devaluation starts, and it does start often very subtly, and it's not very obvious. The whole goal is to try to like break this person down, just to establish a level of dominance or control, or just like the upper hand within the relationship. And it can be extremely difficult to recognize like when it is happening, because sometimes it can just seem like a very weird like fight, or a disagreement, or what have you. But it'll often include blame shifting. It also includes like just undermining your choices, or like I said, just kind of picking fights over like just kind of like nothing or like out of the blue things. Put down, sometimes withholding affection. And it can kind of just increase in like frequency and like severity over time. Which a lot of those things I have experienced. And then one of the more like, I would say like extreme ones that kind of started to happen as time went on was sleep deprivation. That was another one that happened quite often within my relationship once it got to a certain point. So, and what I mean by like sleep deprivation is like oftentimes I would be woken up like just in the middle of the night while I'm sleeping, and they would just start a fight with me over things that have maybe already been discussed, or things that they are feeling insecure about that really are just pulled out of thin air, quite honestly. And they will use that as a way to kind of like wear you down. And usually they will have some kind of like something that they're demanding out of you, and they will typically like wear you down, run you in circles, use like word salad to kind of like just absolutely break your brain. And then you just kind of give in to whatever it is that they're asking for as a way to, you know, just to get what they need from you. Because when you were just sleeping, like you just want to go back to bed, and you have to get up in the morning, and now you're doing a whole thing. Yeah, so it's an incredibly awful tactic, but also a very it's a very powerful one at that. It's powerful. I don't know if I would like that description, but it works, and it's awful. Another part of the cycle that I like to continue, or that I like to include rather, is repetition. And I say repetition because there is often a oscillation between idealization and devaluation, and like, you know, reconciliation, that just kind of creates this pattern of like drastic highs and lows within the relationship. And this is what creates that infamous trauma bond that people talk about when it comes to these toxic relationship dynamics. And this is what makes it so incredibly hard to leave, and just kind of creates this level of like cognitive dissonance, and just also just questioning your reality overall, and not knowing which side to really buy of this person. And it can just be like incredibly painful to experience, but because you just have a hard time seeing the relationship for what it really is. And it does also kind of in the brain, and like studies have shown this, that this dynamic lights up like the same areas of the brain that addiction can create in the brain. So again, it makes it incredibly hard to leave these situations, even when like it's not healthy, and it's all in all kind of scary. But usually this pattern will maybe continue for some time before the next phase, which is like the discard phase. I think the most common way that this typically goes down is that the abuser discards the person of interest, right? And this can happen a few ways. Sometimes they just kind of ghost out of nowhere. And like I said, this kind of just really depends on individual situation. They can ghost out of nowhere, or they can just say like, I'm done, without like a complete explanation. And then sometimes they have somebody else lined up, and they are ready to replace the person that they were targeting before. But with me, that wasn't necessarily the case. I was the one to leave, which I know is less common. We can say this is maybe like the last or final or an additional stage that can happen, which is hoovering. And within this part of the cycle, they typically try to draw the person back in. And this can also be another very, very difficult part of it, depending on where you are at the time. And this often involves like, they promise to change, or they're just, saying a lot of like fluff, what you might want to hear, or maybe guilt tripping, or even threats. I know with my experience, this definitely happened to me, and there was a lot of promise to change, but then again, at the same time, there was like, but why should I have to change? Like, and then, but if they even had an idea that I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't even like believe that I opened the door back up again to you, like, then they would just start to change their tune very quickly. But then there was also just a lot of guilt tripping for me even leaving in the first place, even though like it was such an unhealthy situation that like that was in my best interest for me to leave, especially without notice, unfortunately, because I was afraid what would happen if they did know that I was leaving, or if I told them that I was leaving them, because the mind games, it's brutal. And also threats. They never threatened me, but they definitely threatened to kill themselves more than once, and which is a very scary thing. And even though I had enough confidence to kind of know, I'm like, okay, this is definitely a tactic that they're using to try to like emotionally manipulate the situation, it was still very disturbing to have to deal with, because that's never something that I or anyone would want to take lightly. But it's so distressing to ever put that on somebody. And a very common tactic that is employed. And because of that, it does make it very difficult to walk away at times. Like, that emotional turmoil is like I said, very debilitating in that situation, regardless if you are how aware you are of the tactics. All right, so now that we've kind of covered the whole cycle that occurs, like a general idea of what the cycle can look like, so let's talk about some signs that someone is dealing with narcissistic abuse, toxic abuse, or maybe someone that has. So the first one I have is isolation. Typically, if you have a friend who is usually not so like isolated and to themselves, that could be a big reason. I know that was definitely one of like the things that I that people started to notice about me, like some of the friends that we knew and that I hung out with, like they definitely started to notice that I didn't come around as much, or if I did, that I was very quick with my visitations, and then I would leave very quickly and suddenly. And sometimes if they invited one or both of us out, and then I would be like, okay, yeah, sure, and then like I'll get back to you, and then I get back to them and I tell them no, and I often did something called like buffering, where I would make up some bullshit story, and it wasn't fun, and eventually like you're just not going out anymore, and some people are inviting you out and some people don't want to invite you out anymore. But I know for me, there were friends that I had that I would still like, whenever I could, I would go out and see them, and I would say I'm running errands, but I would just like go see like my friends at their job or whatever, but then I would just very quickly try to get home before anyone knew that I was out, basically, because I did not want to have to deal with the questioning and not fun. And it's in that sort of living, I think, actually created, I would say, like an agoraphobia that I had to like work through, like once I actually left the relationship. For some time, I really was afraid to like leave the house for like an extended period of time, or to be like a certain distance away from the house for a certain period of time, even though like I was living with family, like once I left, and like nobody was worried about that. Like nobody was gonna yell at me when I got home, but yet like I think there was still like a belief that I'm gonna be yelled at if I'm out for too long, or if I hang out with my friends or whatever. It was very difficult. It was a very difficult adjustment to weed that out, for sure. But anyway, on to the next one. Self-doubt and guilt. This often comes from really just like gaslighting and like blame shifting. Like within the relationship, like there's definitely going to be a whole lot of like mental gymnastics that goes on, especially with like if you like bring up any kind of issues or how you might be feeling or like whatever, there's often not a lot of space for that, and that often somehow gets turned on you in some way, or that that's left to be like a you problem, basically. I laugh because not because it's funny or anything, but it's like I laugh like recounting the situations that I was in, and I'm just like, holy shit. Like the things that I tolerated was very heartbreaking, and like being on the other side of it, I'll say, is it's such a stark difference. And I'm really glad to be here and doing this, like, and making these videos and being able to say that there's light on the other side. And if you're like brave enough to leave, I'm proud of you, because it is scary, and I very well could have stayed in that situation forever. And I'm really proud of anyone who chooses to be brave and walk away from that. And being with my husband now, who is like the best. I love him. Like, there is hope for healthy relationships, and I'm living proof of that, and that's why I'm very committed to doing what I'm doing now with creating this content and being a coach for relationships. But anyway, self-doubt and guilt. So, like I said, a lot of that can just come from, again, like, there was not much space for you to express how you feel, and if there was, like, it was often like shifted and, you know, put on you somehow, like, you know, that's yours and yours alone to take care of, and they just don't have time for you, or they can't be bothered with you. And sometimes, even if they don't like directly say that, it's like how they choose to respond does communicate that. And oftentimes you're just kind of left with no support, but you are expected to 100% support them. So you're kind of just doing double the emotional labor. So that ends up just creating doubt in yourself and just guilt for a lot of things, even though, like, it's not your task. And sometimes some people I know, like, they definitely experience, like, you know, being insulted on their, like, intelligence or their capability from their abuser, and that can also kind of create another level of self-doubt. The list goes on, which also kind of does go into, like, self-gaslighting. Your perception can end up being so distorted by this person that you kind of just do resort to self-gaslighting. And that's a whole trip in and of itself. And if you're someone like me who has complex trauma and probably had it even before going into this relationship, just with the family dynamic that I had growing up, you know, you can kind of be prone to self-gaslighting anyway, because, you know, if you're just in the environment that tells you, like, you can't trust yourself, then that kind of becomes an internal, like, belief that you just can't trust yourself or your memory or your judgment, whatever. And, you know, part of the whole, as I mentioned earlier, with, like, how I was often not really allowed to really go anywhere without this person. So if I did want to go somewhere, I often did so without telling them. And that kind of created a level of, like, agoraphobia. But the whole idea was to kind of, like, instill this idea that I'm not safe. That is something that this person said to me quite regularly. You know, like, the world's not safe, I'm not safe, and I'm not safe without them. Yeah. So, on to the next. Physical symptoms are very common when dealing with an abuser and having dealt with, like, abuse and complex trauma. Headaches were a very common one for me, and that is a common one. Restlessness and irritability, appetite changes, nausea. I was throwing up constantly when I was in this relationship with this person. Chronic pain, digestive issues, and sleep issues. And yeah, a lot of those I also had as well. I very, very, very frequently had migraine issues. And I also very frequently just had like digestive and nausea issues. And these are also things that I am, like, I guess, prone to time, but however the frequency and the intensity was like unprecedented when I was with this person. And again, like, I cannot tell you like when I last had a migraine, like that was just out of nowhere, since I left this person. Like, granted, I've like had like a migraine type of headache like when I got into the car accident last week, but like we know why that happened. Whereas like you know, when I had like pretty frequent migraines, it was just like frequently, and just it would just happen. And it was just to the point where I had to get on meds to try to curb it as much as possible. Yep. So the next one I have on my list is decision making. Your ability to make decisions is it becomes a little shaky, for sure. And again, like I said, that comes a lot from, like, you know, being just kind of gaslighted, or just having your or just, you know, just generally like being invalidated, and like having your judgment questioned, and just kind of just having your sense of self-trust just being eroded at. So you will have difficult making like decisions for yourself sometimes, because of that. But then also there's also that dominance and control factor as well. Like, if, you know, odds are they were the type that had to have that dominance and control over you, and they were making decisions for you, and you did not have a voice or a say. So then you just have difficulty making decisions within the relationship, and even like once you're outside of it. And it becomes way more apparent once you are outside of it, for sure. Self-destructive behavior can be quite common. I don't know that well, that's not true. I would say for me, that looked like overspending and maybe eating, and substances. I would say that's maybe. But I think once it kind of got toward the end, like, I really wasn't interested in like numbing it out or anything like that, because I feel like I was kind of already just very checked out, which that's another thing we'll get to later. But I would say spending a lot of money just to kind of get like a dopamine hit, like that was something for me. But it can look a lot of different ways. Self-destructive behaviors, it could with the self-destructive behaviors, and that can happen for like a lot of reasons, and sometimes it is just as like a way to cope with what is happening, and sometimes it's also just as like a result of, do I want to say almost like recreating, or the overall feeling that is kind of created, this like almost like chaotic behavior creates the same feeling that the relationship does. And like once you are in it for a certain amount of time, your body just gets used to that. So that's what it looks for and it seeks out. And again, like for me, that really just looked like spending. And everybody is different, so that can look different on anybody. It can be substance abuse. It can be maybe how you drive, like if you're driving recklessly, or it can just vary from person to person, but that's just some of the ways. Self-harm, yes, that's another one. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. But yeah, self-harm, hurting oneself physically. I don't know how I forgot that, but yeah, that's another way. Loss of identity, that is another one, and I would say something that I also struggled with once I left my my toxic relationship, and largely because they just slowly over time just amputate you from everything that you are. And that's the thing that I find so wild about it, is that I feel like, for me anyway, and I feel like it is common for a lot of people, that they get into a relationship with this person, and this person just claims to like love and adore like all of these things about you, that they then turn around to just destroy because it is a threat to them and their insecurity, essentially. Your light is a threat to them, and they simply can't handle it. So again, in order for them to feel secure within the relationship, they have to amputate you down, essentially. A lot of the things that I did, which was like, working in makeup and being a makeup artist and working on photo shoots and with photographers and with models and being a model, like all of this stuff was no longer in the cards for me anymore. Like once I got into a relationship with this person, even though that's who I was when I walked into it. And even tattoos. So I've got a lot of tattoos. And I had a bunch of them walking into it, and that's always been who I am. I go a few months into this relationship. I would say it was around the 8 or 9 month mark, and I come to find out that he has a problem with me having tattoos. And so it was like a big fight a lot. It was like a source of like a lot of arguments, and it was very frustrating. And because I love tattoos and I love the art of tattoos, and the amount of shame that I received from this person for having them was absolutely insane. And just for once I left this person to go and get a tattoo. Not a good one, I should say. But but like right after I left, like I then he gets a tattoo, and I find out later, like when my hoovering phase like happened for me, then that's when I found that out, and I'm just like, this makes no sense. But but I yes, like a lot of who I was, I kind of got cut off from, and you're just kind of like denied permission to be yourself. And sometimes it happens for so long that then you just forget who you are, and it's like a very, 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 very painful thing to experience. And luckily I feel like I get to do this, and I get to help people reclaim that, and that is what I want to do also with this channel and with my coaching services, is to help you connect with yourself and regain and reclaim your identity, because you're a badass, and the badass in you needs to shine. All right, so the next one, struggling with boundaries. So odds are, when you got into this relationship with this person, that you struggled with boundaries anyway. Because that is kind of how that happens, is if you kind of already have a boundary issue walking into it. And I will say, again, because of how my family dynamic was, like I was a person who just had piss poor boundaries. So I was basically set up and groomed for this relationship from jump. So I feel like most people, loving and wonderful people that get into relationships with people, is a lot of the time because, well, they're not really educated on this type of person, and they lack boundaries. And I would feel like that was more of my issue, is that like I lacked boundaries, and an understanding of what a proper and improper boundary was. And again, that had everything to do with the dynamic that I grew up in, for sure. And then once you're kind of like outside of that, a lot of people can still struggle to set boundaries and even like know like what is an appropriate boundary and what is not, and all of that fun stuff, which is entirely understandable, because even like sometimes can even go from one extreme to another, just because it's like they don't understand where the middle is, like where the healthy balance is. So then that segues also into sacrificing needs. Sacrificing needs is another very, very common one. Often people will just kind of overlook their needs for the other person, just because with being in this type of dynamic, you are prepped and primed to just neglect yourself. You are groomed to neglect yourself for this person, because there's no room for you and your needs and your thoughts and desires and yada yada yada. There's no space for you, and you're just doing the emotional labor for two people, so you're just prepped and primed to just function that way. A lot of the times you will see people just kind of form a people-pleasing identity. Now, not all the time, but it's very common. And then anxiety and depression, again, just a very common byproduct of just being in this dynamic and having been in this dynamic. It shapes your worldview, and even like just having PTSD-like symptoms, like it's very common after being in this type of dynamic. And then with that, you'll often see like stress responses, whether it's freeze, fight, flight, or fawn. Sometimes you can oscillate between different ones, or sometimes people are maybe likely to resort to one in particular. I know for me, like freeze response was very common for me, especially like when I was in that relationship and like he just started yelling, like I just check out. Very common for me. And even in it, to this day, I would say like even in any kind of like high stress situation, I tend to lock up and shut down, especially if I just don't feel safe. It's very common for me to lock up and shut down. But also depending on the situation, it can also look a little bit different how I might respond, but freeze was a very common one for me. And then with that, there's also like the feeling on edge, feeling very like irritable, which is again, like this all kind of also just falls into like common, like complex trauma or PTSD symptoms. And then dissociation, like I said, a lot of the time I was very likely to just kind of like check out and dissociate, and sometimes even just in the middle of a Tuesday, like I would just often just kind of glaze over and just check out, because I just had a hard time coping with what was reality at the time. So it was very common for me to just kind of be like 1,000-yard stare, checked out, and glazed over. And I was very like not in my body because it was too painful. And if you are, even if you're kind of out of that situation, it is a very conscious, it can be a very conscious, like, learning process to feel safety in your body and to get back into your body and being okay with feeling into your body. So that is definitely necessary to do, like, once you are out of that situation. Yes, dissociation, it's a very common one as well with that, because you're just checking out from your body, from reality, and it can be very debilitating, and just a general very common one with PTSD, and like one you definitely just have to consciously put effort and work through to get back into your body. All right, and then trust issues, again, another very common one, and just a very like PTSD like symptom. Again, this shit changes your whole fucking worldview. It fucks your shit up. It does. So yeah, you have a hard time. I mean, not even just trusting the world around you, but even just yourself. Because like I said, you know, before, there's a lot of gaslighting that's involved. There's a lot of like invalidation and just kind of having a person just making you question yourself and your judgment and like your ways of thinking and being and existing and like just all of the things. So eventually you just lose trust with yourself and the world around you and just your worldview. And also there's also just a sense of like struggling to trust yourself, because you're just like, how did I not see this? How did I end up here with this person? How can I trust myself and my judgment for like, maybe for real? Because this person is even saying that, you know, that I can't trust my own judgment, and I'm just like, well, maybe I ended up here with them. It's a wild ride. So yeah, trust can be a very difficult thing, especially when you are out and on the other side of it. You are just, you know, you're hyper vigilant and almost just trying to not find the same person with a different face. I get it. So healing, what does that look like? First and foremost, going no fucking contact. And if you're in a situation to where like you have children and maybe that's not possible, getting away from them for sure, but it's like gray rocking whenever you are dealing with this person. And gray rocking, what that is just kind of basically having the personality of a gray rock whenever you are around them, and you just show no emotion, just give them no emotion, no response, no nothing. And sometimes that can be easier said than done, and it's not meant to be a long-term solution ever. So, because something that I feel like I have seen is that people trying to use that gray rock method as a way of like interfacing with them like on a regular basis, when like it's not realistic. It's to be saying like living with them and still trying to like employ that tactic to just kind of deal and interface with the said abuser. Like it's not a sustainable solution. It's only meant for like if there are moments where you do have to deal with said abuser. Because it also takes some practice as well, I would say, to be able to kind of manage and keep yourself composed and regulated while also employing this tactic, because odds are they will try you. And also a support system. Definitely have a good support system. Have trusted family members and friends, people that understand what you're going through and who are going to be very understanding and patient and lovely and wonderful. And I will forever thank my friend Nadia for getting me through this period of my life to where I was dealing and recovering from my relationship. Because if I not had the people that I had around me, who knows? But I definitely believed in me to figure it out for sure. But I think, you know, the people that are on board with helping you back to yourself is exactly what you need. And then therapy and coaching. Get a good therapist, get a coach, because they will definitely be your people, because I don't think I could have done it without having that as well, like having access to therapy and having access to guidance during this time, and boundary work. So like I said, odds are if you got into a relationship with this type of person, it's because boundaries was definitely at the forefront of it. So boundary work and understanding like how to set proper boundaries, what proper boundaries are, and getting comfortable with setting boundaries and standing on them and staying consistent in them. That's gonna be huge. And then like self-esteem, like rebuilding your self-esteem and your confidence, remembering who you are and rediscovering yourself, and maybe going back to what you liked, or maybe pursuing things that you haven't tried that maybe you've been wanting to try, and just getting to know you all over again. Rebuilding your relationship with you is going to be your biggest thing. And forgiving yourself, because honestly, this can happen to just about anybody. It can happen to anybody. Like, I don't care what anyone says. It can happen to anybody. And you have to give yourself that grace and compassion, because like these are highly skilled manipulators and it can happen to anyone, and it's not your fault what they did. Thank yourself for pulling yourself out of it and recognizing that you needed to remove yourself out of it. Okay, well, this has been my summary of like the narcissistic and toxic abuse cycle, and what the signs and symptoms can look like, and what healing can look like, and what are some things to take into consideration when healing. So let me know, like, are you in a toxic abusive relationship? Have you made it out of one? Like, what do you feel like was maybe some signs and symptoms that were in your experience, and maybe what did that healing look like for you? Or maybe what questions or concerns do you have about any of these processes? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for being here and being on this journey with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.